Live at 9, we're speaking of November, which is a month of the National Diabetes, at a time when communities across the globe team up to bring attention to diabetes. So doctors and government officials in the country are becoming increasingly concerned at the country's growing incidence of diabetes, which they attribute to changes in lifestyle, rising obesity. And joining us to discuss the rising cases of diabetes is Kabanda David. He is the CEO, Center for Food and Human Rights. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Kabanda, for joining us. If you could start us off with telling us how big a problem diabetes is in the country and what explains it.
Thank you so much, Mabel. Diabetes is a disease both in science but also in sociology. We are celebrating this annually, and it was by a UN resolution that November is dedicated on celebrating the Diabetes Day. But in Uganda, we have 2.8 million people who are suffering from diabetes, and beyond that, we also have 8.9% of the population suffering from pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes is when a person is at the verge of becoming diabetic, and there are other many people who are at the risk. So that is the magnitude that has failed. It does not produce insulin, but there is also type 2, which is related to the food that we eat and also the lifestyles that we engage in without doing physical exercise and also eating health diets.
So, Mr. Kabanda, what is rarely talked about is the role of the existing laws that can actually prevent, and I'll say generally, non-communicable diseases, because diabetes falls in that category. So please make us aware of some of these laws and how they can actually prevent Ugandans generally from getting these diseases.
Thank you so much. Law is a critical tool that we can use to prevent diabetes and also in care. The theme for this year is access to care. Uganda as a country has a role to play. They have a legal obligation under the Constitution on the right to health, but also the right to food, to protect, respect, and fulfill the rights of Ugandans, to give them information. Secondly, in the Food and Drugs Act under Section 42, the Minister of Health has powers to come up with regulations, and we are calling upon the Minister to give us regulations on the front of the pack nutrition labeling. If you are diabetic today, it is very difficult to find the food that you should eat because we have too many products coming on the market and they are not regulated at all. They come up with all fancy names, and the food is high in sugar, high in salt, and high in fat. So we want a regulation on nutrition labeling, but we also need a regulation in Uganda on the marketing and restriction of marketing, advertising to children, going to their schools. For heaven's sake, why should we have sugar-sweetened beverages in school canteens? We have food and beverages industry enjoying a lot of space without anyone restricting them. We call upon Uganda Communications Commission to prevail over this open advertisement of unsafe food to children. And we also want government to implement the right to food, adequate food, looking at health diets. So the role of law emanates from the Constitution itself. And
let me come in there. Because of time, I need to ask this. If we go back now to the patients of diabetes who are watching right now, and you also talked about pre-diabetes. So what can they do to actually make sure that they don't make it worse, or the pre-diabetic don't acquire the disease?
So, and this is very simple. I want to communicate to the nation. If everyone should go for checkup. For your BMI, now overweight in Uganda, and others have transitioned into obesity. We need to cut down the weight. That is number one. The number two, we must do regular exercises. And it doesn't mean that you need to go to a gym or stretch yourself. It starts simple. You can cut back on that. Then number 3, health diets. Make sure that you eat food that is not high in salt, fat, and sugar. Processed foods are a danger. Mabel, many people are moving with an assassin. Many people who have belly fat, that one is the first number 1 indicator that you are having insulin resistance, that the body is not regulating your sugar. So as an individual, whether you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, you need to already start eating safe by eating more fruits and vegetables and cutting down on food that is high in carbohydrates, sugar and salt, like I said. But also, you have a right, and nobody should carry out stigma on people who have diabetes. And you also have a right to access health care. So nobody should be stopped. This is why we are calling upon government to have nutritionists in all the infrastructure, starting from Health Center 3, because many people are sick and they don't know how they should take care of themselves.
All right, thank you so much, David Kabanda. They're the CEO of Center for Food and Human Rights. As you continue to watch NBS Live at 9, we'll take a very short break, pick a fruit or a vegetable as we return.
More to come